to stay innovative and to be collaborative, we keep coming back to this idea of learning and ideas, but that is a big part of exposing people to things that might be different than what they've seen before. To us, that's diversity, eclectic viewpoints, all sorts of backgrounds and experiences. If we share that in a comfortable way, we're all learning something and we're producing better work and we're happier, more engaged employees. That, to me, is the cornerstone of the culture and what we continue to reinforce and promote and to invest in.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Talent Playbook podcast. My name is Jason Ferrara. I'm the Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer at Outmatch and your host for the podcast. Our podcast focuses on strategies for transforming your world of work. So during each podcast, we highlight someone who's transformed their organization or industry in a significant way. Today's guest is Rosemary Haefner. Rosemary is the Chief People Officer of Spins, a data and insights company focused on the healthy food and consumer products market. Spins fosters healthier, more vibrant living with good nutrition. While we do talk a bit about Spins during the podcast, we spend much more time talking about Rosemary's role and how she's helping to build Spins. Listen for a few specifics on building a company in a high-growth environment, including building a department roadmap. So taking a page from the Agile software development playbook, you'll hear how Rosemary applies these theories to her team and their work. Second, listen for how learning the business is a major key to success for a human capital executive, and frankly, any executive. And third, how culture, brand, and talent selection are intimately connected. I'm sure you'll enjoy Rosemary's insight. There are lots of great specific examples and takeaways that happened during our conversation. So without further delay, here's the Talent Playbook podcast with Rosemary Haefner. Hey, Rosemary, thanks for joining the podcast today. We're excited to have you on, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Very happy to be here.
So what I thought we'd do first is I know you, but I don't think most of our listeners know you. So I thought maybe just describe, your job and your company briefly for everybody. We can kind of set the stage, put some context out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I am currently with an organization called Spins, and our business is, if I were to sum it up, we provide data and insights on consumer behaviors at point of purchase in the health and specialty product space. So mission-wise, we have the information that helps brands and retailers and small to big CPG firms ensure that they have the products that are healthy and that people want, and it is a really growing market, so it's a fun organization to be in. My role is to lead the people operations team. There's a lot of building and a lot of growth, so for me that means a lot of things I can tinker with and champion and challenge, so every day is a fun day.
Great. So thanks for that. Just set the stage a little bit more. What is a healthy product?
So that can range, I think the starting point of the company was more around what you would think of as sort of natural, organic, specialty foods. As we've grown, it's gotten into other verticals, other sectors like health and beauty, even pet-specific products. You may start to see things like it's not just your old school dog food. It's healthier, natural, specialty, organic dog food. So there's a lot of different growth from where we first started off, where it was more around certainly a commitment still. Let's improve the food supply in America and make sure that access to healthier ingredients, it's easier for consumers to get to those. But it's interesting, as you just probably search online or hear in the news or read in the paper, if you're still reading the hard copy paper, you see a lot more in other verticals around this idea of a healthier offering. And so it's something we've been able to expand the data and the intelligence we have as really the entire broader market is going in that direction.
Great. Thanks. Yeah, that helps. And obviously that data is incredibly important. I mean, every scan at every register, right, is a piece of data that you use then to feed back to the manufacturer or the distribution company, right?
Yeah, exactly. It is literally that. Every sort of UPC, every scan, and then breaking that down. There's so many levels to that data of different nutrients, but different ingredients, different attributes to the product. Is coconut oil really that popular? Why, where, how? Should we create more products for that? Do we sell more of that in Kansas City versus LA? Like the uses for the data are pretty incredible, but the market is also evolving so much, and you hear about new trends, new health research, again, new ingredients, and so those scans, it's sort of a never-ending growth in terms of what we have to stay up to date on. So a lot of our key roles here, as you would expect, around data scientists and engineers and even nutritionists. How can we onboard that data, scrub it, and share it back as quickly as possible and as accurately as possible? Because big decisions and investments are being made on that.
Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit more about your role. So you said people operations team. So what falls under the umbrella of people operations?
Yeah, it's funny. I've seen in my career, it was personnel, then it's HR, and now you see sort of people and people operations, and that's where the role is expanded. And I think what is the difference? It's the holy grail. We're moving from just defining policies and guidelines. We're moving more towards being technology-based. We're moving towards being business people who happen to specialize in HR. And so it is around the people. That's the core of what people ops or HR teams do. But I think the way that we work here, my team and within SPINS as an organization, is a little bit different than what you might see in some other organizations that are still using the terminology of HR.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to definitely get back to that, but first I'd like to just talk a little bit about your history. How did you get started in human capital, people operations, whatever label you want to put on it? How did you get your start? How did that get all started with you?
I'm not shy to admit I totally stumbled upon it. I totally fell into it. I mean, there was not some calculated plan. When I went to school and I went to undergrad, you could not get a degree in HR. Now you can do that.
Right.
And I was kind of moments away from entering into a 2-year program that nonprofit still exists called Teacher America. I was going to move from Chicago across the country to LA and become a teacher for a couple of years. And then they decided in the school district in LA to go on strike, so there was no role. So I, needed to scramble, and I'm a scrappy person. And there was a role that was open with an HR team, and so I jumped on that. And one weekend, the individual, my manager at that time, was let go, and suddenly I was a one-person show. As I look back at it, I was like, "Were they insane?" But I'm a fast learner, and I will ask questions. And it's probably one of the best things that happened to me. I've stayed with it ever since. It gives a lot of variety. You can impact a lot of lives, and if you can think from sort of a build your business acumen perspective, you can have a lot of broad-based impact, especially in organizations changing and growing. And so I've stayed with it, but totally by accident. And I'm the first to admit it was not my life plan at the time, but now I've settled on it and it's working.
Yeah. So a couple times you've mentioned building and growth, and it's sort of in the context of the jobs that you've had, but also in the context of the company you're with, right? The healthy food market is growing like crazy. So what is your role in terms of a growing market and growing a company?
That's a great question. I mean, I think the roles that I've always had, it's I'm ticking both those boxes, right? It affords that opportunity. I think that for sure, I'm a strong believer after decades in the HR space. I do think that being mindful about the framework of your organization, the culture, your values, how people feel they're being recognized and developed and growing is absolutely critical for the overall success of an organization. And I think you get this nice intersection when it's an organization like SPINS, where the market itself is growing and forming. As a leader within the people operations team, and it affords me to be a leader within the organization as a whole. Mm-hmm. I can help really help articulate for the organization what where are we going? Being able to impact strategy to solve business problems. And the way I'm helping us do that in a collaborative way is I may have a leaning or sort of a filter from a human capital standpoint. But when you're in organizations that are trying to take multiple perspectives and together you get the best solution, that's part of my role as well. How can we best monetize different products? How do we decide, what is the methodology of our product development queue? People might say, you're an HR person. Why are you in those discussions? Well, I bring a different perspective than what you might find from our CTO or our CFO. But there are a lot of organizations increasingly, I'm happy to say, that understand coming with the best solution means you've vetted it from multiple angles.
Right.
And from an HR perspective, you're a key angle that has to be taken into consideration.
So that's, I'm glad you're going into that, and we're talking about this. It's one of the things you and I have worked together in the past. It's one of the things that I've liked about you and working with you so much is that you think about the business strategy and how what you need to do fits the business strategy. So where did you learn that? How did you learn that?
Oh my gosh, that's my secret sauce. That just means I'm not really sure. I think by nature, I like to tinker with things. I think the one side may be my brain doesn't always turn off, right? But I feel like I have ideas, I have opinions. It doesn't mean I'm always right. I get the best ideas from some of the most unexpected sources. I kind of approach problem solving. It may be a broader perspective. It's just personally, professionally, that's how I am. I want to be told if there's a different way to do things. I want to learn. I want to engage. And I think because that's the way that's sort of how I'm wired, that in the professional or business setting, it means I am taking on a variety of feedback that makes me stronger as a business partner, as an HR professional, but allows me to contribute back, right? When people say, oh, HR wants a seat at the table, I'm kind of like, that's your goal? Like just sitting at a table? Like, what do you do when you get there? Like, you want to engage. You want to have something to say, but I also want to learn something. It's a two-way conversation. It's just how I am wired. And I think if you gain confidence over time to give input and share back, you're looked at, again, as I said before, you're a business person who happens to specialize in human capital or people, but you're a business person first. It's, I don't know if that answers your question. I think it's just, it's sometimes you're wired a certain way. I'm naturally inquisitive. I want to learn on all sorts of topics. I want to kind of hone my craft. And, there are things where I feel passionate, like I can have a good impact, and I'm going to know when I'm going to stand for that and not compromise. And if you find yourself in the luxurious position of working with other people or within an organization that is also wired that way, man, you can do some really great things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you are answering my question. I think the root of it seems to be curiosity and just intellectual, that striving for intellectual stimulation, and where do I go learn the most, and how do I surround myself with people who are going to be curious about the business and the market and the people as well. At least that's one of the things I heard in your answer, and I think that's important. If you're just going through the motions of, did we process payroll properly? Does everybody have benefits? How many open recs do we have? You have much less strategic value to the organization than if you can be in those conversations.
I mean, even if you think about metrics that, they've stood the test of time, right? Like, time to fill, right? People have that. They're used to it, but to a point. I'd rather think broader. I'm more sort of, what's the idea I'm solving for? I track sort of relativity, right? Like, time to fill is an absolute finite number. And we're averaging 30 days, 45, whatever it may be. But relative to the rest of the openings, or if other levers are pushed up or down, like, that to me is a more useful metric or view of not just what we've done, but forward looking what we could predict would happen, right? So I tend to look at the offering that my team and myself can give to an organization in probably a broader based way. So
what now you mentioned metrics. What are those metrics that, you either look at to run the business or to run the people operations team? What are those key metrics that you zero in on?
Yeah, some of what I was just talking about, like we are a growing organization, so of course when you look at staffing and hiring, and it's you do need to be able to have some of those table stakes around how long would it take and what are we averaging, key sources and all of that. But I think this idea that still hasn't totally taken off in the market around supply and demand, or even from a diversity perspective and inclusion, like having a quota or number, I was like, well, goals are great, but where did you get that? What does that mean? How likely is that to be something you could deliver on? Have you looked at the market within which you are working and operating and what is possible, instead of somebody just serving up, here's your target? Because then it just becomes a finite, like, I tick the box, I met that. But is that really the richness of the story? Are you better for it? Is it the culture you want, right? So it's a long-winded answer to your question, your simple question, but there's certainly some numerical metrics, and those are great. Like I said, it's table stakes, but being able to not just have the data, but know what the story is and what you're striving for. As we're growing a culture here alongside an organization, that's probably more meaningful when I have exchanges with my CEO, more than number of recs, time to fill. It's like relative to other positions and what we're seeing 12 to 18 months out, where are we going to need to slow roll? Where do we go faster? What additional investment do we need? The last thing I would say, I'm always kind of fascinated with somewhat of the branding aspect, right? So I think a lot of HR professionals have an opportunity to learn from people like you and think like a marketer, right? And so what is that brand, that sort of index internally, externally? So we track a lot and talk a lot about that. I do want to have great people. I want them here as soon as I need them. But do I have the right ambassadors for my culture, my brand, short, mid, and long term?
Yeah.
So there's so many things that you can be tracking, and it's great to see more and more tools that are out there to make it easier and more conversation amongst my peer group around meaningful analytics. I'm excited to see as we learn more as we go in the next 5 years, what cool things people are going to come up with that we could track easily.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's exciting to be a part of that growth of analytics applied to another part of the business. And there is like this amazing, we were talking about data earlier. There's this amazing opportunity of all this data that you can look at to say, and then to answer those relative questions, right? So we're getting them in at this time, but there are these people, these types of profiles, and how long do they stay? How, what is their performance? How do I replicate that in my hiring process? There's a ton of data like that available now that you sort of had to go on gut or not have at all just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a day in the life there. How and what you do on a daily basis, because I think that's going to open up some opportunities for us to talk about some specific areas of the business and your job.
How can I? You should tell me. Every answer needs to be 10 words or less, because I run out. I mean, a day in the life is, because of the types of environments I think I've gravitated towards in my career, there tends to be, not too many days that are the same. You're growing, you're acquiring, sometimes you're shrinking. You don't take things apart the way you put them together, right? So not every day is going to be sort of textbook. I think for me, what I've tried to do as much as I can, the majority of the time, to structure my days, my weeks out, where I do have time to think, to kind of plan, to connect, engage. And then there's also roll up your sleeves and get things done. Mm-hmm. Depending on what's going on, what sort of, where we are in our roadmap, what kind of seasonality we're hitting, that could be a variety of things. I might, there may be some key roles and I'm in there recruiting. I also could be helping with diligence with an acquisition. I may be doing off-site planning sessions and facilitating them for the senior team. Like there's so many different things, and I think that's probably why I've stayed within the HR space for so long. If you want variety, there's such a large variety that will use sort of left brain and right brain. And so my day in the life is it's a bit of everything. I think where I would say, where the challenges everybody has, it's what I call sort of the accidental conversation. You go to get water, you run into somebody,
right.
It's like, hey, how you doing? Great. And then all of a sudden it turns into this, accidental conversation that's really deep and meaningful. And yeah, the brain in your head's like, I've got a lot of other stuff to do, but this is really compelling. I'm learning something I'm going to need. To me, that's a day in the life. And I feel like things are going well if people feel comfortable in those accidental moments to share things, these nuggets of gold. That to me is, I'm ingrained, that's success. I'm getting that information in the best way possible, and then we can turn that into solutions and impacts.
Yeah, so you're not sitting at your desk ordering people around and having other people do the work.
No. I have I'm in my office now. If you were here, what you would see is one entire wall is a whiteboard. It's sort of instead of like whiteboard wallpaper, and I've got stuff up there and horrible handwriting that looks like some sort of hieroglyphics. But, where if you have ideas, you can capture them, you can come back to them. It's something I try and do with my team. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot of time-bound work when you're in HR. There's good things you need to keep, kind of the machine oiled and engine running. But you do need to have time to be thinking ahead, and as much from a personal development perspective as what other solutions are fresh and ahead of the curve. So we do have a roadmap with here are the key massive projects and milestones, but we also have what we call the idea board, those quick ideas, capture them on there. And it's everyone on the team has access. You put your ideas up, people get pinged. There's a new one, you can comment. And those are sort of our sprint projects, kind of in the world of agile. These are the small hits. They may not be big enough to go on the roadmap, but it affords people this idea of don't stifle those ideas that pop into your head because you have to run to a meeting or you have to run payroll by a certain time. It's a quick way to capture it and collaborate and decide, what do we move forward on? So it's a different way sometimes to work from people I talk to in sort of my peer group, but everybody does what works for them.
Yeah. So you do have a roadmap. You have a people operations roadmap. Is that how do you develop that? What goes into creating that roadmap?
Yeah, I think it's key. I mean, I have found, especially being in environments that I have where there's always been just a common denominator of a lot of change, right? Like you can sometimes just feel, what did I do today? I talk to a lot of people and, am I directionally correct? I'm moving forward. So a roadmap is a good anchor, I think, especially within a people ops and kind of HR space of knowing there are big projects, right? I think, they're, sure, and maybe, hey, we're going to implement some new technology and systems, and that's on the roadmap, great. But you also have the day-to-day big things. There's audits, there's, compliance filings, there's things that don't, not everybody thinks sounds great, but balancing your roadmap with, here are the key big day-to-day items through the course of the year. How much time do we have for these other items? But then you also do need the smaller wins along time, and that's how we leverage our roadmap with this idea board. But that roadmap is something, for the team, the way we talk about it is like we do brainstorm sessions with my team, and here's what our overarching themes and goals, kind of areas of focus for the year. That's our kickoff. What are some ideas around that? What needs to be on the milestone? Yeah, I might have the final vote and say on that, but I do want my team to be thinking through, as I say, kind of life is about choices, There's so many great things we can do. It's not practical. Let's look at these big milestone projects day to day, other big ones on top of that foundation, stuff, these small ideas, sprint ideas. Like, it also helps me if I'm in the case of needing to make a case for more resources or investment. Here's what it is. Hey, CEO, hey, CFO, look at what we're doing. Look at what we're producing. it helps me guide my updates back to the senior team of what we're delivering and asking myself and my team directly, like, are we really impacting as much as we think we are? Like, let's show. You can just get so caught up in any role, I think, even personally, right? If like, I feel so busy, I've done all this stuff. Sometimes those quarters or years where you're like, I work the hardest, I put in the most hours, it doesn't mean you have the best results, right? And so I think the roadmap helps me stay anchored about the choices I'm making for the team and for the company.
So how does that roadmap then integrate with the larger company strategy?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there's some cascading down. Here's company strategy, and there's somewhere I'm like, this is just good medicine, so we're doing it.
Right.
But I think, if I look at the organization I'm at right now, for example, I mean, we've had over the last 4 or 5 years, this sustained sort of 20% plus growth year over year. So it's a really great story. It's a great trajectory. But you've got a company growing at such a fast pace. You do have to think not just about what new product you're going to greenlight or sunset to hit your revenue goals. It's around is it the culture scaling? Are the values working? Yeah, sure. There's the cornerstone of benefits, and are we giving and getting the right type of feedback, right? But there is that cascading from the overall company goals to my team's focus to help not just sustain growth, but sustain healthy growth. The culture, the mission we have, how we present ourselves to clients is also mirrored internally. What programming does my team need to build to ensure that happens? I think for forward looking for my team, biggest opportunities are this classic case. It's great. We're growing. Rah, rah, rah. It's great. But like, how do we make sure that there's good development opportunities for people? And that's something where you can keep very business focused and delivering to your clients. We're committed. We have to make sure we're freeing time up so that they can get the learning and development they need. And, we want them to grow with the company, not the company to outgrow them. So there's a lot of initiatives around L&D and performance feedback and culture building that you would see all over the roadmap.
That's great. Sorry, I'm making some notes. I love this conversation so much. We're just going to make this podcast last for a couple of hours. I hope you're okay with that. We're just writing notes here.
Really good. I've got snacks, water, and
that's
all good.
So let's talk a little bit about employees as you get into L&D and performance management and those sorts of things. So what do you see as a successful employee at Spins? What kind of things are you looking for? What characteristics do they have? How do you measure that? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think, to be successful, we talk about people need to be determined and passionate, collaborative, direct. And I think, direct is the value or concept that if I had to choose where we focus the most as a team and helping employees understand that it's communicating with clarity and honesty and respect, but it's solution based. You're oriented around solutions, whether internally or externally for clients, products you're recommending. Salespeople should be recommending solutions that have impact, not just items, right? There's so many different ways to bring it to light. But I think to be successful here, it is a fast-growing market, as we've talked about a few times. And that can be really exciting, but it's also challenging to stay fresh on trends. It's to make sure you're understanding the complex businesses of our clients. And so you have to be wired that way to stay engaged and keep learning. So people that are successful here and really thrive and enjoy are wired that way. And so we have to be able to deliver those opportunities too for them, raising their business acumen, leadership skills, along with the product and industry knowledge, right? But it's, I think there's conversations I've had here where at the start when I got here, it was, we offer a lot of great benefits. There's a gym and there's free yoga and massages. And so, that's great. It's a great wellness offering. It's like, people that would that want to come to spins are like yoga enthusiasts. I'm like, is that our definition?
That's your brand, right? Yeah.
I mean, this is literally, and I was like, no, like, let's take a step back. It's
Right.
people that are all about balance, but, they are, thinkers, and they're striving to grow and better themselves and the planet.
Yeah. So some of that, it's funny because some of what you just said is inside a yoga enthusiast, but it's not being a yoga enthusiast. It's the things that you get, some of the reasons that you are a yoga enthusiast, because you like the balance, and you like to be curious, and you like to understand, and you like to improve, and that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so as you select employees who are solution based, then you build a culture around that. So, we haven't talked about how long you've been at Spins, but in the grand scheme of your career, it's been a relatively short time that you've been at Spins. What impact have you had on the culture? Have you had to, build that from scratch? Have you had to tweak that because there was something already there? Where does the culture, how does that occupy your day?
Yeah. It occupies like a big part of my day every day. And that's in part, I've been here less than a year, so about 8-9 months. So that's not a very long period of time. And one of the reasons why I came, though, was just this idea of trying to define and build and scale the culture. I find that really fun and challenging work. And I think it's also married with the fact that it's a smaller organization from what I'm used to. I mean, there's roughly 300 employees, and there's this added footnote of 70% of them are centralized in one location, but another 30 are sprinkled around the country, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you establish and scale culture? How well can you do that when you don't always see people face to face, right? So there's some challenges and nuances that would make this exciting for me. And I think the culture, the opportunity is, especially when you're of a certain size, you have that phenomenon. Everybody knows everybody's name. And so they believe they know how people need to be managed or what they want in their careers. Not always true, right? But, as this organization continues to grow, not everybody will know everyone. The virtual population, remote workers, gets bigger, right? So there's this opportunity to create a culture that is innovative. It's a tech organization. We want to be innovative, but the culture was not strong enough, in my belief, in terms of how people collaborated and did they feel comfortable and motivated to collaborate. So you may have personal passions, you may have ideas around the industry of the company, but providing a platform from a human capital perspective where it's encouraged to collaborate, it's encouraged to give and get feedback. They feel like it's a safe place to do that, and action is taken, that they have options they can talk about in terms of career pathing and what we think they need to learn. And it's not just tick the box, mm-hmm. you took sort of Excel 101, right? A big part of exposing people to things that might be different than what they've seen before. To us, that's diversity, eclectic viewpoints, all sorts of backgrounds and experiences. If we share that in a comfortable way, we're all learning something and we're producing better work and we're happier, more engaged employees, right? Yeah. So that to me is the cornerstone of the culture and what we continue to reinforce and promote and, to invest in.
So define collaboration for me. I the reason I ask is I was at a company once in my career that, said that they prized collaboration, but really what that meant was you couldn't make your own decision, right? It was basically like you can make whatever decision you want as long as you've run it through this group of people, which to me isn't collaboration. But I'm interested because I can guarantee you don't see it that way either. How do you define collaboration?
Yeah, I think your point, what I hear you saying is like, you could say you're that, but it doesn't make it true, right? Mm-hmm. And just spouting off ideas and brainstorming, if they're really not listened to, doesn't make anybody feel like it was worth their time. So, I think what we're trying to build here is an idea, key components of not just saying, but let's really do it right. Leave your egos at the door. Like, you have to agree to disagree. These are the ground rules coming in, that you have to be okay with the fact that, the outcome might be greater than each individual's contribution or idea. And that's hard to do. And that means sometimes we have to agree to disagree. But it can be really powerful if you can get a group of people together who can do that. It's not for everybody, right? And so I think, sometimes you'll have businesses that will do hackathons and all sorts of great things. Come and collaborate, give your idea. But it doesn't work in every organization if people feel like, I take a day out of my life to do that, and then we don't really, green light any of these, right? So I think we try and make sure that from the CEO throughout the organization, we're finding ways to bring those ideas forward. If we're not green lighting them, we're explaining the why, and we're kind of, we're making that a very individual conversation. Because I think for collaboration to work, you have to get people into the mindset of sharing their idea, having the ideas, being comfortable sharing them, and then showing, I asked for them and this is what I did with it. That's sort of the 3-step recipe of what I've seen work and what we're trying to do here. But it's not just lip service.
Right. Great. Thank you. Okay. I want to shift gears a little bit. I've got a couple of more specific questions. Culture can be pretty wide ranging. So, talk a little bit about changes in HR in your career. I mean, obviously we've touched on a few of those here, but just when you think back about your career in human capital, like, what's the biggest change you've seen, experienced in that time?
Oh boy, a lot of changes, which I think is a good thing. I do feel like, not to oversimplify, but just the ability to leverage technology has been such a defining evolution. It certainly gives you efficiencies and gives you time, but it gives you insight and data and analytics. But that time also, a lot of times people will say to me, I'm so disappointed, I bought this tool, the system, and it's not done what the salesperson told me to do. Like, technology on its own doesn't just fix something, but it can free up time, right? But it affords you a way to work differently or to then invest back. Technology can't remove the human element. There's still that connection that's needed in every organization. But technology, I think, has been very defining for a lot of parts of business, but the HR space it's probably been the least comfortable for people to. How many stories do you hear about, I bought this tool and then, the vendor comes back, I can see you haven't logged in. It's right. Because it's like, it's going to fix it. But so it can be really powerful. I think what I also see that's different, and we still have kind of my personal mission, I still think we've got room to go. I think HR people who think like marketers, who think like CFOs, who kind of vet their ideas and opinions, before they go public with it, they can really hold their own in a good business debate. I think that's something I've seen change over time and will continue to evolve. Yep. But there's a lot of exciting developments.
I think that, to me, that's one of the key. I mean, you've touched on two big themes, right? Technology and obviously human capital leaders who think about the business and think like a CEO or think like another executive in the business. One of the reasons why I always give the book to people who join the company, what the CEO wants you to know. So it's like there are these really fundamental things that you should just know that this is the way other people are thinking about the business. So that can be very powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
And certainly in a discipline where that may not be the immediate expectation of everybody, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about mentors and mentorship. So have you had a mentor in your career? And if so, what was that relationship like, and what did you take away from that relationship?
Oh gosh, I think there are a couple people kind of through the years that probably acted as a mentor. I don't know that I have one person who's been sort of my go-to throughout. I think when I started out earlier in my career, I was part of a consulting division, HR consulting division, under kind of the arm of a tax and audit firm. It was back in the models of Anderson Consulting and all of those. But and it was required. It was one of the onboarding steps. You are required to pick a mentor. Like nothing like pressure when you're like starting out and you have to ask somebody to be your mentor. But people, I still remember it. A lot of the partners of that firm, they're like, "This is strange. You're in the HR consulting division." And the person I picked was a partner in the tax group, and it was just something different. I wanted a different perspective. What could I learn from him? I probably would not have had any other interaction with him if I hadn't done that. And the first few years of my career, I think that was really helpful to kind of, a different version of the book title you're talking about, right? It's like, what is that broader world and what has he learned? And it wasn't just HR specific. So that was good. And I think another person that for a longer period of my career was a go-to is actually somebody I started off working for her, and then, many, many, many roles later, still in touch. And the thing that I learned from her, she was just so balanced. Like she was juggling so many things. She was a business owner. She was building. Every time I came to see with her, she made me feel like I was the only thing going. Like everything was put aside. She was completely focused. She was open with feedback. She was thoughtful. She never seemed rushed. So it wasn't that there was a particular subject matter or topic, but just this idea of ultimate mentor, of like safe place, whatever you need, you're going to get a thoughtful bit of feedback. And as I reflect over my career on this woman, I was like, man, I need to try and do that. And you have people come by your office or even personally, and they have something, they need something, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have so many things to do, or I'm running for a plane or whatever. But if you can just stop and take a breath and connect, that's what they remember. And so she taught me a lot of great lessons early on.
Yeah, that is really, really important. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about advice, because I'm sure that you love to give advice. Everybody loves giving advice. But one of the final questions I'll ask you here is just what advice would you give to people who are starting their careers?
Oh, yeah. I mean, regardless of what field you're starting in, regardless, for me, it's, it's probably similar to what I did. So that feels like an easy, cheap cop-out answer. But, learn. Look, there's 168 hours in a week. If you have a full-time job, it's a big portion of that you add in your commute, sleeping, you can start to feel stretched really quickly, and you want to enjoy what you're doing. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to know what that is, what gives them joy the majority of time. And I think the best way to figure that out is to just be open to ideas, to learn, to volunteer, whether it's for projects that are in a different, group within work, whether that's volunteering outside of work. All of those experiences collectively give you what is, we refer to as my gut. My gut says this, my gut says that. When you are taking on all those experiences and learning from other people and kind of figuring out what you believe to be true, that's where you find sort of the jobs or the companies, the environments that you really enjoy for that big part of the 168 hours a week that we focus on work. I think that more people I talk to are entering the workforce now, are more wired for that. But there's also the expectation, success is I got promoted in 6 months or I make a certain amount of money. It's like, that runs its course pretty quickly when you have to work for decades and decades and decades, right? And so being open to those other experiences and throwing yourself into what I call being sort of appropriately frustrated, like you're stretched, you're out of your element. Yeah. You just get a better idea of how you're wired and what you want to do.
Yeah, that learning is something that I personally have gotten from you just in our previous conversations, and the importance of doing that. It's some of the best times I've had working with you are really around that, when I realized that's what was going on. And That's just incredibly important. And it's just incredibly important, right? And it's really
when
fun
the big
to do.
reveal happens,
It's
we figured out what the master plan was.
That's right. That's right. Well, Rosemary, thank you for the time, and thank you for having us learn a little bit about you and about spins and about the way you approach your job and your career and your life. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime, Jason.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Talent Playbook podcast with our guest, Rosemary Haefner. If you want to learn more about Rosemary, start at LinkedIn for her professional bio. You can learn more about Spins at spins.com, spins.com. And you can follow Rosemary on Twitter at Haefner_R. So HAEFNER_R. You can subscribe and download this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and Outmatch.com. Thank you to Rosemary for her time. It was really great getting to talk to her, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Thanks also to Charles Summers and Chris Gardner at Outmatch for the technical assistance, and our theme music was composed by Chris Gardner. Until next time, this is Jason Ferrara saying thanks for listening.